Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Goodness. Ready for the Trump wave? Are you? The 47th President of the United States assumed power for the second time. Trump believes he has been saved by God to make America great again. 2 assassination attempts, one which he came very close to. So he assumed on his duties by signing number of executive orders by which he has reversed roughly about 78 orders previously put in by the Biden government. It appears Trump 2.0 moved towards conservative positioning. Some believe such move may take humanity backwards. Trump has taken the world by surprise by passing some executive orders which deemed controversial in the eyes of many. And here are some that we should actually look at. Diversity, equality takes a backward step. So he cancelled the executive orders, those which have promoted diversity, equity, and inclusion, and promoted rights for LGBTQ plus people and racial minorities, fulfilling promises to curtail protections for the most marginalized Americans. So Trump cancels 78 executive orders signed by his predecessor, Joe Biden, including at least a dozen measures supporting the racial equity and combating discrimination against gay and transgender people. Trump abolished other orders aimed at helping Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian American and Pacific Islanders, by which he is driving U.S. population towards forging a society that is colorblind and merit-based, sure, which in fact changes the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female. This could potentially lead to review the plans of funding cuts for initiatives like discriminatory programs and diversity training activities. So many corporations have distanced themselves from diversity, equity, and inclusion measures, with some rolling back on DEI initiatives and programs in recent weeks, such as Metadata, McDonald's, and Walmart have announced that they are ending some or all of their diversity practice, except companies like Costco, Apple have remained resolute in maintaining their commitment to DEI. Right advocates have said any DEI and transgender right rollbacks implemented by Trump would be a blow to hard-fought efforts to secure equitable policies and undermine progress made to address systemic prejudice that have deprived equal opportunities for marginalized groups for decades. We will continue our relentless effort to protect immigrant rights, combat voter suppression, and confront hate and discrimination in all its forms, Asian Americans Advancing Justice said in a statement. So US citizens will need to get used to the new norm. So what does it look like? US funding on gender transition medical procedures can no longer be used. During his first term, Trump announced that he would ban transgender troops from serving in the military, and his administration did freeze recruitment of transgender personnel. Biden overturned that decision when he took office in 2021. Now that agenda is back on the table. Prisons, migrant shelters, and rape shelters could immediately begin moving transgender people into spaces that align with their birth sexes as opposed to their gender identities. For example, trans women serving time in women's prison could be in short order to be moved to male prisons. So those who have X in their gender marker on federal documents like the passports now should exercise caution when they leave the country, as they could have challenges re-entering the United States and could even be held in detention by border agents. If a customs and border agent can't enter a person's X-gender marker into the system to allow the persons back into the United States, that could mean that the person would remain in customs and border protection custody until they can work with the Department of State to get an alternative ID issued. Agencies that handle health care for transgender Americans, or the way the Department of Housing and Urban Development protects transgender tenants from being evicted by landlord, could take longer to implement because agencies will have to go through a process that takes months or even years to change the rules governing them. While there are a civil rights organization that litigates on behalf of LGBTQ Americans are working together to sue the administration over the executive actions. When legal challenges are filed, courts could seek to block implementation of the order by issuing injunctions. But courts could also decide to allow the order to be implemented, as the present government will work through the systems of courts, and including the Supreme Court, which would side with Trump administration. Well, after all, the President of the United States has come to power with the support of 49.8% of popular votes and winning over 312 seats. What else could you expect, right? I think it's important to know that the world does not stop just because US has made some harsh moves. Following Taiwan and Nepal, Thailand gets on the bandwagon recently. Almost 2,000 same-sex and transgender couples married in Thailand post-kingdom's equal marriage law being implemented. That's right. No one stopped for just the US to get on board, right? The largest Asian nation, Thailand, by implementing the same-sex marriage law, has recognized equal marriage rights, including for transgender individuals, and to extend adoption and inheritance right to all married couples. Let's get on to the other executive order that he's been playing with, is the illegal immigration. Trump signed an executive order to block refugees from entering US for 120 days and immigrants from 7 predominantly Muslim nations for 3 months. So according to the Human Rights Watch, refugees vetted and en route to the US have now been blocked from entry. Immigration-related executive orders attempt to eviscerate that right to seek asylum and other forms of humanitarian protection, increase immigration detention, and fast-track deportation without due process. So Trump administration's crackdown on immigration could both drive up inflation as well as hurt the range of businesses by shrinking the nation's workforce. US economics say a reduction in labor supply means upward pressure on wages, which has different sector implications, including inflationary pressure, especially for food prices. In the above circumstance, Trump's order on federal agencies with developing ways to potentially ease prices for US consumers will be a failed attempt, isn't it so? So there are roughly about 8.3 million undocumented immigrants work in the US, or just over 5% of the country's workforce, out of which about 20% of them are accounted under agriculture industry overall workforce, although that figure can rise to roughly half to some specialty farms, harvesting delicate fruits and more labor-intensive than, for example, growing cereal crops. That means mass deportation could lead to price hikes in the food aisle. The inflationary impact could impact food overall, but particularly fresh foods rather than the ingredients in more processed foods, according to the local economist. Construction companies, including businesses focused on home renovations and landscaping, have the next highest share of undocumented workers and would also like to face a labor shortage if the government clamps down. Locals say with regards to some home improvement project, those prices, they might become unaffordable to the point where people feel they can't do them anymore and their lack of supply will be a bigger issue there. Restaurant and food service businesses, which employ large numbers of undocumented workers, could be at a particular risk if deportations flare. A shortage of workers could likely force such enterprises, including millions of small eateries around the US, to raise their wages to attract new employees. But that would also lead to hikes in menu prices, especially driving away customers. So that's because there are some jobs where even higher pay generally fails to attract US-born workers, like farming. Wages might not rise, and instead we will see short-term lack of availability of workers for harvesting crops. A lot of immigrants do jobs that support the jobs held by Americans. So here are some questions for you. Will this bring back the American workers back into the workforce? It has been reported in 2024 there are about 700,000 or more people in US were homeless due to cost of living crisis, rising home prices, etc. Will the change now give them an opportunity to seek financial means or push more people into homelessness? Now, is this the time to bring back the workers who unfortunately has lost their jobs as the immigrant takeover of jobs started to happen in US for cheap labor? Remember that, right? So back into the workforce and help them to come out of the systemic reliance on the government assistance. And most importantly, the third one, would legal immigrants be welcomed with open arms by Mr. Trump? Now, connecting to the local context, according to the Sri Lankan Foreign Ministry, Sri Lanka is not on the list of 7 countries mentioned in the executive order whose citizens have been banned from entering the US for a period of 3 months. Sri Lankan missions in the US had informed that the Foreign Affairs Ministry that there are no confirmed cases of Sri Lankans being stranded at the US airport due to the ban. According to the spokesperson of the minister, the Sri Lankan missions are keeping an eye on the situation and are in touch with relevant US authorities on this matter. All right, did it actually stop there? No. 90 days pause on foreign development assistance. Trump ordered a 90-day pause on foreign development assistance pending assessment on efficiencies and consistency with his foreign policy. It's not immediately clear how broad the order has been and what programs could be implemented, impacted, which countries, non-governmental organization, and international organization would be affected by this move. Remember, in the first term, he proposed to cut about a third of US diplomacy and aid budgets, which included steep reduction in funding for UN peacekeeping and international organizations. Then at the annual gathering of world leaders at the United Nations in 2018, Trump complained that the US has a large foreign aid donor, but few give anything to them. Well, he has a valid argument, right? And he went on saying that is why we are taking a hard look at US foreign assistance. Moving forward, we are only going to give foreign aid to those who respect us and frankly are our friends. So until that point, the United States remained as the largest donor to the United Nations. Despite President Donald Trump's effort to cut funding in his first term, President Joe Biden aimed and affirmed the United Nations' importance to US foreign policy and increased funding to the organization. In 2021, Biden resumed funding streams paused under Trump, including the UN Population Fund and UN Relief and Work Agency for Palestine refugees in Near East funds. So it contributed to more than $18 billion in 2022, accounting for 1/3 of the funding of the body's collective budget. However, Biden paused UNRWA funding again in 2024. Wonder why? Over allegation that some agency employees aided in the October 2023 terrorist attacks on Israel. That sparked the current war between Israel and Palestine militant group Hamas. So US foreign development assistance has been paused, putting many human rights defenders around the world and the people they help protect at greater risk, as they depend on the support for their work. There will also be far-reaching consequences for international humanitarian and development assistance, disrupting vital life-saving assistance to millions of people. Now, how critical is US funding to the United Nations? US contributions often represent a significant percentage of the UN's revenue. Large portion of the funding goes for the World Food Program. The stand that was previously taken is we need to pay our bills to keep our seat on the table. I think Trump is not interested in that. This move has stirred the local politics within the United States, where Democrats are planning other strategies to counter Trump's order to freeze funding from a messaging standpoint, including by highlighting the ways Americans are hurt by the president's moves. I guess this leaves a number of questions now needs to be addressed by the United Nations. Should they continue to rely on a high portion of their funding coming out of US? Or is it time for them to look at disrupting their existing funding model and look for alternatives? Look, United Nations has about 193 countries in the member pool, and decide how each of them can contribute to a better world, not just financially. One may contribute from an agricultural sector contribution, the other may be from the services side, and other come from the construction side. I guess possibilities are worth exploring. These funding cuts are not just going to affect UN. There are other non-governmental civil rights, child and women welfare organizations around the world that are going to be affected, including the ones present in Sri Lanka. Now, you touch the dollar, we will target BRICS. Tit for tat. US President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to impose 100% tariffs on a bloc of 9 nations if they were to create a rival currency to the US dollar. In his own words, we require a commitment from these countries that they will either create a new BRICS currency, nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar. I should say, mighty US dollar. They will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling the wonderful US economy. Wonderful US economy. The NATO countries that do not meet the 2% of the spending target, and if they are part of BRICS nation, US will impose at least 100% tariffs on business they do with the United States, Trump says. India was the first one to jump to protect their back since the election win by Trump, anticipating such message to follow in the future, I guess. In December 2024, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said India had never been for de-dollarization, and they have no proposal to have BRICS currency. A tariff is a domestic tax levied on goods as they enter the country, proportional to the value of the import. So if the car imported into US with a value of $50,000 US, subject to 25% of tariffs, would face about $12,500 charge. So he claims it is not going to be the cost, so as in he, Trump, claims it is not going to be the cost to the local. It is the cost to another country. So here's the question. The charge is physically paid by the domestic company that imports the good, not the foreign company that exports them. So in that sense, it's a straightforward tax paid by the domestic US firm to the US government, isn't it? The BRICS was created as a counterbalance to the G7 bloc and includes Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, along with the other countries, which altogether represent around half of the world's population. Critics say that the BRICS has anti-Western and anti-American objective due to several initiatives that counter those put forward by the G7, the EU, and the US. So among other initiatives, the BRICS group of countries is considering creating an alternative currency to the dollar to counterbalance the US and the Chinese giants. Let's see what happens in that space. Now, Trump pulled the plug on climate agreement. US withdrew from the landmark Paris Climate Agreement, dealing a blow to the worldwide effort to combat global warming and once again distancing the US from its closest allies. The first Trump administration made a similar move in 2017, but that step was promptly reversed by President Joe Biden's first day in office in 2021. The aim of the agreement to limiting long-term global warming to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, or failing that, keeping temperatures at least well below 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So according to Trump, Paris Accord is among the number of international agreements that don't reflect US values and steer American taxpayers' dollars to countries that do not require or merit or financial assistance in the interest of the American people. Instead of joining a global agreement, the United States' successful track record of advancing both economic and environment objectives should be a model for other countries. Make America proud. All right, the CEO of the European Climate Foundation and the key architect of the Paris Accord called the planned US withdrawal unfortunate, but said, action to slow climate change is stronger than any single country's politics or policies. The real-world implications of the expected forthcoming withdrawal of the US from the Paris Agreement under Trump 2.0 may turn out to be less consequential than some observers have feared. Despite the clear abdication of global leadership and the great disappointment that will surely be felt by many in the government, environmental advocacy, academia, and private industry. By far, the greater climate policy consequences will be in terms of extensive and severe downgrading of US domestic climate. By far, the greater climate policy consequences will be in terms of extensive and severe downgrading of US domestic climate and energy policy, whether via legislation, regulations, or both. Now, US will join Iran, Yemen, and Libya as the only countries to currently stand outside the agreement, which was signed 10 years ago in the French capital. Now, the Trump wave will continue to shake up the global politics as their executive orders and his policies will come into effect. The next 4 years of US politics, it's going to be an entertainment to the world. This will shake up many organizations and wars. The power play will shift. Global order never stays the same. It moves, it flows. I will leave you from this point and catch up with you in another episode of Goodness. Until then, you look after yourself and bye for now.